The letters loan that was approved by the Nigerian Senate has continued to raise a lot of questions and concern among many Nigerians coming within the MID's reports that Nigeria's debt exposure to the World Bank International Development has increased to over $17.1 billion as of September 30. These has continued to spark. Recall that just last week, the Nigerian Senate had approved the $2.2 billion, and that is over 1.77 trillion naira for the president in respect to external borrowing. That those are really having a concern about the state of the economy, the fragile condition of the state of the economy, and how all of that can be repaid in respect to even underscoring the debt service, the debt status of the country, and how Nigeria will be committed in this payment. What is prompting the president for this borrowing? What are we borrowing for? What areas of our development do we say that this is the target and this is why we need to borrow? Yes, government have spoken, but it looks like why it is raising a lot of concern is because many government have borrowed, but really what the questions that continue to be raised has not really been answered. Many have not really feel the impact of some of these borrowing, and that's the reason why the approval of the Senate last week has continued to spark a whole lot of conversation. And tonight on the program, we'll be extracting that development to see does the president have good intentions to borrow, and if we must borrow, should we not take into consideration on how we can channel much of that borrowing to? Kenny Babasi, a legal practitioner and a political commentator, is live here on the program to extract this issue with us tonight. Thanks so much for joining us. It's been a while.
Good evening.
Yes. A lot of concern about debt services. Those are really having as a projection about why we have to borrow. Is the time right? Are we borrowing for the good intentions and all of that? What do you feel I make out of that? Because the Senate swiftly, urgently, had approved the 2.2 billion, which is still sparking a lot of concern.
Yeah, good to be here once again. The issue of Nigeria's debt profile and borrowing by government have remained a very touchy topic in our sphere lately. It is true that the Senate and House of Representatives had considered a request from the executive arm of government led by President Bola Ahmed Tinubu to borrow an additional $2.2 billion to fill up the deficit of Nigeria's 2024 budget, which stands at around $9 million US. Now, before we delve into the issue of Nigeria's debt profile and borrowing, we need to put facts in proper context. I'd like us to x-ray these facts clearly so that Nigerians will also have the ample opportunity to lay the facts on the table and determine whether or not loans are necessary, or if they are necessary, or where they are necessary, to what extent is the increase in borrowing, or what effect does it have on the economy. First and foremost, I'd like to state very clearly that the Nigerian Bureau of Statistics has said that Nigeria's debt profile as of June 2024, this includes external borrowing and domestic loans, stands at 134 billion naira. 134 billion naira. This naturally translates to around $91 billion. 134 trillion naira, which naturally translates to $91 billion. Now, the debt profile of Coca-Cola's debt profile, referring to liabilities by Coca-Cola, a company that has worldwide status, is around $95 billion. The debt profile of Tesla, owned by multi-billionaire Elon Musk, is a little above $100 billion. The debt profile of Microsoft, the richest conglomerate on planet Earth, so it is being reported, is in the excess of $200 billion. So many people have actually put Nigeria on the same scale, saying if mega companies of that nature have such debt profiles, Nigeria is a larger country, Nigeria is a big country, and should have a wider economy, has lower external debt profile. That's on one limb. On the other limb, I would like us to look at the fact that all governments around the world borrow. Even the United States of America, reputed to be the largest economy in the world, still borrow till date. Some say America can borrow at any time because the world trades on its currency. Some experts disagree, but we are talking on the issue of borrowing. So borrowing, especially in the context of the global economic recession, is almost inevitable. What is the issue with borrowing? The issue with borrowing lies in the transparency of government and the sectors to which this borrowing applies. Don't forget, last week, before Mr. President sent that request to the Senate, a bill had been sent to the House of Representatives and the Senate for the creation of the Nigerian Social Investment Program, Establishment Act, which seeks to increase social investment funding, social investment programs of government. And the government had said one reason why it continues to borrow is to fill up the deficit of its budget and also increase social spending. Now, a lot of issues arise. Number one, is government transparent with its exact debt profile? Is it also transparent with its borrowing needs and plans? Do they actually put to use the exact amounts that they are borrowing for the purposes and sectors for which they intend to borrow? Now, this has been a touchy issue because most Nigerians are worried that government says it has saved over $2.2 billion from the fuel subsidy it removed last year, May 2023. So why would government want to borrow another 2.2 billion in 2024 if you save 2.2 billion in subsidy?
Now, we're going to come to that.
Okay.
Because it looks that those are also having the explanation that they do not have physical cash of
that is correct.
The savings of the subsidy. But what is bothering and the French worry is how they will source, servicing all of these. They have also made concern about euro bonds. That those are really having a concern because the current situation for Nigerians is still very difficult enough. And Nigerians are saying that for government to borrow again, they're increasing, their challenges they are facing. And also, it looks that they are also dragging to have this as a burden on them. How do we begin to manage this expectation? On the other hand, this government said, we are borrowing for the right cause. But for over time, we've had many borrowings and loans that have been given to Nigeria, but it looks that we have not properly channeled them to the right source.
I don't believe that Nigeria will stop borrowing until we start producing. We are making a consumption economy. What are we producing?
So have we borrowed to produce from your...
The experts say that if you're a producing economy, what you borrow, paying back, repayment plan should not affect your economic indices at all. So what I'm saying first and foremost is, it is almost near impossible in this present state for Nigeria to stop borrowing. If developed nations are borrowing, why not? But the issue is, and I keep reiterating in several fora, the figures released by National Bureau of Statistics is in concomitancy, is in accordance, is sync with what the Debt Management Office is saying. However, Nigeria seems not to have a very organized flow of statistics that can be dependent. What we had during the last 8 years of the government of President Muhammadu Buhari is different from what this present government is saying. So let's take, assuming without considering that these figures are true, what are we borrowing for? To meet up Nigeria's budget. What is the performance indices of 2024 budget? Don't forget we are turbulent times as we speak in the economy. Government needs to begin to apply most of its resources in reviving the real sectors of the economy, the producing sectors of the economy. Unfortunately, the global economic recession is not just Nigeria bound alone. Many countries of the world are also reacting to it. But in Nigeria's case, the only thing that has helped us manage the shock is the flow of oil and the high price of crude. The day crude finishes in Nigeria, that is the end of the country. We do not have an economy that is reliant outside oil. Agriculture low. Non-crude export economy low. So government needs to begin to look at the producing sectors of the economy. Look back at our raw materials, both natural and artificial. What what can Nigeria produce that beyond the positive effect on foreign exchange, it will reduce borrowing? We should be able to get to a point where Nigeria can do proper budgeting and live within its means. Of course, this is basic economics. You cannot say you have a budget of $10 billion, for example, and then on your budget plan, you had earlier listed, because most of the budget presentations by Mr. President have never always outlined this extent of borrowings. These borrowings always come towards the end, supplementary budgets to meet extent, which is normal. So my evaluation would be that there is a greater need for government to carry citizens along, the stakeholders of the Nigerian project, on its exact extant economic status, debt profile status, and its borrowing plan, and be transparent about it. Why Nigerians have this fear is because government over the years have been seen to be looting, misappropriation of funds, but that doesn't outshine the essence of borrowing. The Nigerian government says that its borrowing plan is healthy and it has healthy plans for repayment. We can argue with them. Experts who argue against this don't even have the facts. Government needs to be more transparent. Government needs to be all-inclusive in its outreach, in its interaction with Nigerians. Because while the amounts said to be borrowed appear to be high, they are almost infinitesimal compared to what these things are generally applied to.
You understand that many Nigerians may not have the opportunity to scrutinize some of the intentions of government in respect to getting loan, that those that have really looked at the National Assembly and also described the National Assembly as a rubber stamp National Assembly, because it looks that the loan was approved with speed, with a swift response, and that those are really having a concern about how they can have a robust engagement. Let's know what is the intentions. Let's engage the sectors that some of this borrowing will be channeled to at that moment, so that Nigerians can continue to see that this is for their own good. Because one of the things we'll find is that there is a separation between there's a disconnection between what government are saying and what the people feels. You must link it up towards the past experiences Nigerians have had. But the more concern is that the National Assembly, many are losing confidence on an institutions of government, an arm of government that is responsible for scrutinizing, checkmating, and all of the description that is attached to the National Assembly in respect to matters like this, which shouldn't be taken for granted. What is your concern about that?
While I don't speak for the National Assembly or any of its committed institutions, I strongly disagree with those who say that the Senate hurriedly passed the request for loans and borrowing. That is not correct. You see, much of what we see on the screens is what we are privileged to see. Probably on the day the Senate decides to grant that request, or maybe read out this letter. There are reports that the Senate as an institution already have committees and organs on finance and the economy, including loans and debt management. And these committees have been working behind the scenes. Engagements have been ongoing, both within the executive and the legislature. What we see as a final drama is what we witness on the screen. Maybe the president of the Senate using the gavel to hit and say, okay, taking a voice vote, and then they approve these loans. Beyond that, reasons for these loans are usually not only stated in the letter sent to this legislature, but are always within the agenda of interactions between agencies in the Ministry of Finance, agents of government who discuss this loan request with the National Assembly and committees of the National Assembly. These engagements have been robust. I understand that. I've been privileged to see these engagements. But Nigerians on the streets, you wouldn't blame Nigerians. Nigerians judge based on what they hear and what they see. And don't forget that in this country, even when government means well, you don't separate it from politics and political sentiments. A lot of the criticism you see out there on the streets are politically motivated. But beyond that, those who are patriotic go down to the basics to do research, ask questions, go to the debt management office, go to the office of the Minister of Finance, go to the National Assembly, ask questions, seek clarifications, seek details. Like I put to you, Nigeria's debt profile is not so humongous compared to what, as we speak.
But we are gradually sinking deeper.
The word sink is relative. The word sinking is relative because the word sinking is beer parlor talk because
we are among the first three compared to Ghana and Uganda, which are having about $7 billion and $5 billion on being the lower countries.
Nigeria is far greater than those countries, and Nigeria can never be put on the same pedestal with apologies on Ghana when it has to do with the economy. I've told you Nigeria's problem is that we are a consuming economy. There are economies in the world.
Are you not having issue because you are not speaking towards that direction? Mismanagement.
Yes, of course. Mismanagement of our state resources would definitely put us in a long pit. Now, government, this is where agencies of government that are directly tasked with plugging these loopholes and fighting corruption come in. You see, corruption alone is not just fighting corruption on the media, on the pages of newspaper, on social media. You fight corruption to the very fabric of government. Who are those who will implement policies of government? Who are those spending these monies that are being borrowed? Because these monies that are borrowed spread into different ministries, parastatals, agencies, and sectors of the economy. And people spend them, subject to Mr. President's approval. But a greater threat lies beyond this. The future economic state of a country that is not producing but keeps borrowing. It gets to a point where all we earn, a larger part of it will be used to service loans, leaving very little room for even actual investment in education, healthcare facility, infrastructure, and other needs of government, including even roads, building new roads and taking up capital projects. So that our recommendations have always been that government should be transparent in disclosing what it needs to borrow for and how it has applied these loans. Don't forget, during the last 8 years of President Muhammadu Buhari, Nigeria took a lot of Chinese loans to take care of needs in the maritime, the transportation needs, trains and substations. And we are seeing the results. Trains are flying across the country. They may not be as efficient as Nigerians expect trains to pass in front of your house, but we've seen train stations. Lately, before the kidnap of passengers along the Abuja-Kaduna corridor, there have been increased movement on train transportation that has, relieved a little pressure and burden on road transport and air travel. As we speak, within the Western corridor, trains are moving. Now, how Nigeria meets those loan obligations is left to the Debt Management Office and the federal government to say, are you actually servicing these loans? I hope there are no deficits. I hope that you are planning. But beyond that, where we find ourselves is worrisome. And no matter how it is sweet-talked, Nigeria needs to begin to have a rescue plan.
All right. There are also genuine concerns about, the terrible hardship, situation in the country, that those that are really having a concern, the business community is having a concern over the potentials, ramifications and additional borrowing on the national financial health, and looking at if these may have, a future consequences where Nigerians will be made to pay more, and underscoring what Nigerians are currently going through, the economic hardship. They're saying that, look, it's not the right time for President Tinubu to borrow. Can we manage ourselves out of this situation first? Is it possible to do all of those mechanisms out?
You see, most Nigerians, like I said, a lot of those critics are dancing around. They are not. They are dancing around the gallery. This is the same set of people who say government should not tax citizens. Government should either borrow or reduce its expenditure. So which is better? If government decides to borrow and reduce its tax on citizens and businesses are already suffering, which is better? If government decides to stop borrowing and decides to increase taxation, of course the citizens will take us to a breaking point. So I still believe that government's borrowing plan is healthy because it comes with its shock absorbers and its future plan for repayments. It is better than overtaxing citizens that are already groaning under the effect of increased petroleum product subsidy and subsidy removal, increased cost of petrol, increased cost of energy, increased cost of doing business. My brother, in 2024, Nigeria has had its highest risk terms on doing business in Nigeria. Many entrepreneurs, many businessmen have actually folded up. We see many foreign investors even packing out and new ones coming in. All these things are reflections of what government policies and the effect of government's economic policies. We have seen some gains. There are noticeable gains, and there are also noticeable challenges. But I believe that the gains are better than the challenges.
All right. I mean, you spoke earlier about how some of these issues of corruption in the country and how important are all of these. But that those are really also beaming their searchlight on the very important institutions that are setting some of these reforms policies. That those are feels that it looks that this government are doing try and error. They're testing this policy. They have introduced tax reforms in a bid to, reforms our taxation system. They are also considering, some borrowing, where the masses are saying, no, it's not the time for borrowing, and all of that. That those that are feeling that the economic team or the reformation that the president is taking Nigerians to is bringing hardship, that the responsibility of government is to make life better, is to create social amenities, is to protect lives, and also give excellence and dividends of democracy that is practiced in the country. That government's coming of government or the state of government is not to increase hardship. That over time, people are saying we are hungry, people are saying things are hard, but it looks like government are still going through the route of taking very hard decision that is biting hearts of Nigerians. How do we explain all of this consideration and underscoring the fact that the president is over time reiterating his commitment to getting things done? He has said, I asked for the job, do not pity me. But what the people are saying, your policies are not popular enough.
Well, Nigeria looks like a baby and a child and led by its father. When a parent pampers its child too much, there is always a future effect. Either that child becomes a criminal or becomes uncontrollable at some point.
Do you say Nigerians have been pampered?
No, I'm using a scenario.
But we have not been pampered before.
No, I'm using a scenario. And then over the years, if you are strict with your child and you restrict certain things away from the child, you teach that child self-sufficiency. You teach that child the potential to think out of the box and to fend for his or herself. Now, this present administration's economic policies, we've been told several times that it is for the good of the economy, for the good of the country. Time will tell. But beyond this, let's put Nigeria in a scenario where if the fuel subsidy was not removed and was in place, and Nigeria would have been a disaster in a very short while. What we're actually even complaining now would have been child's play to what Nigeria would have exploded. Because it would have gotten to a point where Nigeria would be dancing around with Zimbabwe and some other failed economies of the world. It is for issues like this. So I believe government is in the right direction. But beyond that, there has to be checks and balances. There has to be increased transparency. There has to be increased engagement with the civil populace, with Nigerians, on government's borrowing plan, what it actually intends to put these monies to, and how it actually spends this money. Social investment. Is it encouraging entrepreneurship? Is it helping small and medium-scale businesses? This government and the last government of the last 16 years has invested heavily in SMEs. Yet SMEs are complaining. Yet SMEs said they are not in business.
Probably it was the wrong SMEs because from all the statistics we are also seeing that unemployment is still increasing. That's the issue. SMEs in every developed and developing economy drives the real economy. But in Nigeria, we hear of SMEs mostly on paper, in publications and government budgets. So I think government also needs to do more than what it is being reported of doing. As we speak, do we have an accurate data of SMEs in this country? Because don't forget, maybe the problem is even that maybe some civil servants are also SMEs. Look at the last administration of President Buhari. The vice president, the former vice president, Yemi Osibanjo, had gone to several forums to launch several SME-related funds. Trader money, SME injection. Even the Bank of Industry has released in its 2023 report, has released billions of dollars as grants to SMEs. What are these effects? Maybe they need to begin to publish these SMEs that have benefited from government, either as grants or as loans. Now, does this translate to the real economy or the real sectors working? Why are even the increasing number of SMEs saying that they have not felt the impact of government? I was very happy when the director of the is a former senior special assistant to the president on the ease of doing business and chairperson of the Presidential Enabling Council on the PEBEC, was recently sworn in as the Minister of Industry, Trade and Investment. We expect to see even more robust engagements in that direction. We expect to see
greater information. We need to see more information on what government is doing for, with, and through the SMEs. Because if the SMEs that are driving the economy of the country are thriving, unemployment will reduce. Because unemployment, as you say, is of different types. When you say unemployment, are they looking for government jobs? Are people actually not busy? Or they don't have the capital to get busy? So unemployment alone is not just having appointment letters from government agencies or from the private sector. Unemployment, as developed nations see this, how many people are idle, not doing anything?
You feel the informal sector is also contributing?
Yes, of course. Because unemployment should not only be seen in context of what is a person not getting from government. Appointment letters, salaried. No. Unemployment should be looked at with how many people are not able to be productive.
Are you aware that many of the policies that this government have taken, it looks that many have lost their jobs compared to what we had previously?
Yeah, that is true.
There's an increase in that dimension.
Yeah, that is true.
So it looks like government policies are sometimes having a direct impact on these SMEs and some of these...
Around the world, government policies take people out of jobs and bring in new ones. Take a look at the United States. With the coming of President Trump.
But with the poor statistics of Nigerians, do you feel that we ought to go to a policy that would do this?
Well, Nigeria is not yet a developed nation. And those who say it is trial and error, it is not totally an outside opinion. We are still moving. But what Nigerians expect from government and its agencies concerned with managing the economy of this country is greater transparency and collaboration, and probably a greater investment in the real sectors of the economy. You know, I keep mentioning real sectors of the economy. There was a time in the 70s when Nigeria was relying on non-oil exports that drove the budget and drove the economy. Cocoa, for example. What has happened to that sector? Many state governments are busy pillowing resources to do things that they cannot even account for. What has happened to minerals? Nigeria is a great nation that is blessed with deposits of natural resources. But look at the north. Some northern states were seeing increased cases of banditry, terrorism, and violence related to the discovery and exploitation of these natural resources, which ought not to be the case. Government needs to wake up and wake up the real productive sectors of the Nigerian economy. This way, the employment will go down. Even if Nigeria needs to borrow, citizens need not panic. And beyond that, the government needs to begin to reinvest in the trust Nigerians will have on government. I tell you, if Nigerians have trust in the leaders that they have, trust in the sense that they have trust to manage their resources well, trust to mitigate shocks, trust to plan ahead, trust to be proactive, you will not be hearing a lot of these criticisms on government borrowing. Because ideally, there's no government that will not borrow.
Do you feel that it's an overbearing trust?
Yes, of course. It's an after effect of loss of confidence in government and government institutions. So when they hear borrowing, they feel it's another conduit pipe to loot. To
misify their fears.
Yeah, you wouldn't blame Nigerians. We are mainly an economy that relies on information, whatever. And you know, when I say trust, many Nigerians don't even trust the statistics coming from government agencies.
Because
like what I just said about what the Nigerian Bureau of Statistics has said.
Even on unemployment rates, they gave a projection that is, it's not what
No. They may not be entirely wrong, because those who are arguing against the unemployment rate have not given us counter figures and the basis for which they reached. We are bound to, by statistics released.
If we are saying people are losing jobs, by reality, are they concerned that the private sectors can really confirm this? Many have left some persons.
I have also told you how the Bureau of Statistics arrived at that report. Maybe a day we'll take a look at the MBS statistics on its latest unemployment statistics. You see how they arrived. I've said unemployment should not be seen as only people who are not yet employed by government. But they look at it from the productive sectors of our economy. How many are people busy? Are they active? Are those active producing? Are they productive? Because when you talk of unemployment, somebody sits down from morning till night, has nothing to do. He doesn't pay his bills. He relies on a third party. That in its own is just an apparent meaning of unemployment. But beyond that, are those active producing anything? Do Nigerians have a living wage? What is our GDP? compared to per capita income, compared to the economic productivity of the country. And this takes us back to the same issue. When we begin to create and sustain a productive economy, our foreign exchange, our borrowing propensity will also move in line.
Because those are really arguing that the textbook economy is not what is working in Nigeria.
Yes, of course.
And you may have all of those implementation and
Yes.
those theories coming from the textbook, but in practice, we need to develop homegrown economic.
But I don't entirely believe that government is using textbook economics, because this is what political pundits and political critics will always say. What I expect government to do is to be all-inclusive. I've said it here before. In your engagements and interactions with the real sector and managers of the economy and participants, be more transparent and open. The textbook economics, we say, almost all Nigerians who went through economic schools learn the same thing. But coming home is like a professional. You go through a vocational training to become a professional, you get your license. What you learn in real practice is a world away from what you were even taught in school. So, and I believe that most of policies of this government are born out of engagements, indices, research studies.
Are they copying from other countries?
Nigeria doesn't need to copy from any other country. Nigeria only needs to look at it. You use the word homegrown. So the question will be, are they actually homegrown? What are they relying on?
Because it looks
we have a lot of economists in Nigeria who were trained by even these textbook economics you're talking about.
They say they cannot be a best economist. A professor of economics in Nigeria cannot manage our economy.
I don't believe that story. So why was he trained? And who are the best managers of economies in the world?
Because it looks that this government has brought in some economic reforms that is strange to Nigeria.
Well, so some pundits also say, while I don't speak for government, that nothing good comes easy.
The essence is that we have to balance the understanding.
Yes, of course.
Give us this understanding, because the government are explaining, but Nigerians are not really, having it from that direction. They are saying that it is strange, it's not popular, we cannot relate, because farmers can no longer shift some of their goods from this state to the other. There have not been an increased level of purchasing power of Nigerians, but it looks that day by day, many Nigerians are being dragged into poverty. The statistics of poorest of the poor is increasing day by day. This is the simple mathematics that floating the naira, removing subsidy, is that there's no reforms and no attempt, no palliative can cushion this effect. This is what they are really picturing that. And government are saying we cannot go back on these policies.
No, the concerns of Nigerians in that direction, those who are expressing those reservations, are of course valid reservations. They have reasons to feel so. But I also know that nothing good comes easy. No economy has ever emerged stronger without going through a very difficult time like what we're going through. And reforms are a necessary part of restructuring. Economic reforms in particular are a necessary part of recreating, rebuilding an economy that has broken down. What I expected Nigerians to say is, what was the health of Nigeria's economy in the last 10 years? What is government doing now? What is it looking out for in the next 10 years? So when you put all this vis-a-vis, you would say that government's plan and intentions appear to be healthy. What is important is its implementation, transparency in the implementation, and its concomitant multifaceted effect on the economy. Nigerians need to begin to know when to feel the real positive effects of these reforms. Yes, have the reforms reduced their purchasing power? Yes. Has it affected balance of trade? Yes. But going beyond that, what do we see? Is there a breath of life across the horizon? Is there light at the end of the tunnel? Some economic pundits say there is no tunnel, so there's no light anywhere. But then I believe Nigerians should be positive. And, Nigerians need to begin to invest more of their trust in government agencies managing our economy.
People are hungry, there is no how you can appeal for
We've been told, even on the streets, that a hungry man is an angry man. And any man that is hungry even loses his sense of reasoning. So you don't expect somebody who is hungry to go down to the basics and look at your explanations. He needs to eat first.
How do you assess effort of state government? Because we've seen government said we have increased allocation of state. Because I was to come towards the savings from subsidy. Over 20 billion have been saved for subsidy, and that those are really having a concern. where are the savings? The government will explain to you that they've also increased allocation to state and all of those considerations. But it looks at efforts to cushion these effects, short-term plan, are not really visible. And that's the reason that Nigerians are doubting the capacity to get to that better days.
There has been widespread frustration by Nigerians on what the state governments are doing. You know, federal government saying it has increased its allocation to state governments, and the local governments too, has not in any way helped the economic situation of the country, because state governments are not giving out these monies as cash handouts. And most state governments, to be fair, are not actually even investing in the real sectors of their own state economies. And that's where the problem lies. I expect the federal government to have tied the increase of allocations to the states and local governments to some very critical areas of input and investment. For example, if the federal government says, okay, we have increased allocation to the states in the area of ABC, social investment, what steps have they taken to ensure that these state governments fall in line? What punitive measures have been given out to states who fail to account for its own expenditure of increased allocations? Take a look at the South states, South states. Without being biased, the South states have been recipients of the 13% derivation for a very long time. Yet, most of these states, rural areas in most of these states still reek of poverty. Some state governments are trying, for those governors who are mindful of the pulse of the people, but it shouldn't be so. The essence of the state government and the local government as tiers of government closer to the people was to ensure that the dividends of democracy, the dividends of government, the functions and powers of efforts of government go deep down to the real economies, because every politics is local, so is every government and every country local. But in Nigeria, we are not seeing it. Many state governments are even frustrating the economic empowerment of its state citizens. I don't want to call names, but I believe that the government at the center should look back at evaluating these states and then maybe praising those that are doing well and also scolding those that are not. Unfortunately, the fight against corruption has to be increased and intense, because you see, the Supreme Court some weeks ago had ruled that the establishment of the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission by the National Assembly was valid, and dismissed the suit by state governments on its functionality.
Were they trying to frustrate?
Well, I don't know whatever that was, but that led to rest. You see, the EFCC going after many former governors who manage state resources. My own question remains is, maybe immunity, constitutional immunity of these governors shielded them from litigation.
Should we continue to have immunity?
No, removing immunity would mean the disadvantages of removing immunity is even more than the advantages of not removing it, because we live in a very serious political-centered country where every movement of any opposing faction is being politically explained, and that is not healthy. So constitutional immunity, as enshrined in the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria 1999 as amended, is valid and stands the test of time. However, what I expect government to do is to narrow down and mirror more on the activities of state governments and try to create an enabling environment where the state governments become more and more accountable to the people, so that those who occupy public offices as managers of trust on resources of the country will watch their actions and be bound. You may not totally eradicate corruption, but you reduce it to the barest minimum. But in the larger picture, considering the economic health of Nigeria, all hands must be on deck. Government has a greater role to play, to be the man with the task force, to be the one wielding the big stick, not just doing and creating policies, but go after those who sabotage your policies.
I mean, as we begin to wrap up, many states and governments are already proposing, the budget for 2025, and those that will be posed to ask, even the federal government, what is the impact of the 2024 budget? It looks that a whole lot have not been implemented, and that's the reason why sometimes it looks that year in, year out, we have many budget, we have many proposed budget, and sometimes the funds are available, but implementation of all of those itemized on the budget are not really deliver. That those that are really given the concern. Now that we are already having proposed 2025 budget, what more engagement can be done? We're seeing CBN effort in fighting inflation. It looks that it has not really been an easy route for them. What is your take?
Well, the Central Bank of Nigeria has, to its credit, has actually reduced the off-trade corruption that existed around the implementation of policies by the CBN to a greatest minimum. In managing the economy, I believe that the CBN, under the leadership of the present governor, have reacted to the shocks that it met in the economic fiber of this country. But it's too early to judge the CBN, going back the fact that the CBN has retained the old Naira notes in circulation so it does not distort and create greater hardship. They've also gone ahead through their regular MPR meetings to find ways of stabilizing the Naira. But like I always say, the government needs to be more open to Nigerians and tell Nigerians the truth. The value of the Naira has actually depreciated under this administration, largely not because of its economic policies, but because of the fallout effect of the bad management of the economy years back. I keep saying, Nigerians need to become a productive economy. We need to have a robust, creative, productive economy. And it is the obligation of government to invest in these sectors and watch it grow. Presently, without mincing words, the political economy, if you would say, of Nigeria appears to be the one that is most invested on. In case you don't know, politics is an economy in Nigeria. And sad to say, that economy is thriving. That appears to be one of the few remaining economies within the subsector of the Nigerian economy that is thriving. That's why you see increased effort in that direction and less effort on agriculture, less effort on creative economies, less effort on entrepreneurship, less effort on production, less effort on manufacturing. Because less raw materials are being less exploited in Nigeria. People are going outside to take what we don't need. Government is spending money on things they don't even need, instead of growing and rejigging the local economy. It is the local economy that will feed the nation, and not stipends, grants, aid from developed nations who have already structured the economics and the economies to suit their needs. Take the United States, for example. The United States have also been facing shocks of the global economic recession, but have managed to hold those shocks because of the fact that the managers and institutions that manage the economy of the United States are independent in the sense of the word. The Fed Reserve is very independent, unlike the Central Bank of Nigeria, that is susceptible to political changes and periodic change of leadership, as it were. And so it's very easy for the institutions of government to do what they feel is right, whether or not those at the helm of affairs or leadership approve or need be carried out. It doesn't matter what the executive arm of government says. Those institutions managing the economy manage it independently to save their currency, to save their economies, and to save their balance of trade. Fortunately for Nigeria, a Nigerian is the Director General of the World Trade Organization. We need to know, what is the volume of trade coming into Nigeria? What is the volume of trade going out? Is it balanced? There you will know where Nigeria's problems lie. So going beyond that, I believe that Nigerians also need to see themselves as partners in progress in building our economy. It doesn't stop at criticizing government and government institutions for increased borrowing and the expenditure of government. A government wants to buy an aircraft, somebody will go on air and say, no, why is Nigeria acquiring a new jet? Why is Nigeria? If you want your president to go with a commercial jet, that is not a problem. But there are other expenses that are being borne that are greater than that. So there has to be a balance. Managing an economy does not mean that government should stop the engine of government.
Are you saying that the cost of governance have been reduced by this government?
Well, questions have been asked, and we'll get to that point someday. That's why I said it's too early to judge. If you look at the 2024 budget, for example, what has government acquired? What percentage of capital expenditure do we have in that budget vis-a-vis recurrent expenditure? In that budget, what is the government's real investment in those sectors of the economy that will bring yields and returns to the citizens? What is the FIRS, which is a tax body? What are they reporting? Agencies of government are creating revenue. Nigerian Customs Service some weeks back said they have overrun their budget for this year, their potential, their target for this year. So money is coming in. Yes, government said it has saved subsidy. That is left for Nigerians to see. So those who are arguing that why is government still borrowing when you have saved a lot from subsidy and you have overshot your targets are not being fair with how governments work. Governments don't work from like beer parlors. You sit down and just say whatever you like. Nigerians also need to begin to ask questions and go to those relevant places to get the statistics and hold government accountable for these things. There is nothing wrong in borrowing, but the question remains, borrowing for what? If as an individual, you have need for food and shelter, and you borrow to meet those needs, it is good. But the problem arises when you need to repay. Do you have a workable plan and a plan of income that will come for you to repay? That is why Nigerians are worried about what government is borrowing for.
Because it is right self to say that Nigerians only want the country to work.
Yes, if you borrow to rejig the economy, fine. That economy will grow to absorb the shocks of what you did in the past. But if you are just borrowing for a borrowing spree and then just to skip fixing the deficit in the budget, or just to keep ensuring that the expenses of government run, then we are heading for a disaster.
All right. Are you happy with Port Harcourt Refinery? Because it looks that it's on operation.
That a big kudos to Nigeria. Forget about political pundits and those who are bringing false information. Even the NNPC has come out to say that yes, indeed, they are doing a lot of mixing. Nigerians didn't know that there were some chemicals we now mix that turns to fuel. But one thing good, Nigerians need to give credit. I've said it here before, give credit to where credit is due, is that activities have resumed at that refinery. Is it better that those refineries have remained useless as they were and moribund and comatose as it were?
Do we first applaud Dangote? But probably
yes, of course. They're not just Dangote alone. We also applaud this present administration. Because it is within the auspices of the administration.
But those that said they got the inspiration from Dangote.
Wherever they got inspiration, Nigerians want to see their country working. So, and once the country is working, how do you feel hearing that over 200 trucks have already loaded from the particular refinery and are moving towards the south? This is good.
Do you know the elephant in the room? How much would it be sold?
Yes.
That's what we are looking at.
No, but beyond that, Nigeria, we need to have a functional economy. We don't only need to look at areas where humongous amounts are being analyzed without looking at...
When prices of the products drops, it will also drastically affect the economy.
Yes, but an expert had hinted some days ago that Nigerians need to celebrate even small wins. Someone said, why would NNPC, Dangote Refinery come out to say that they have reduced their price by 2 naira or by 20 naira? 20 naira per liter of petrol is big news in Nigeria. Let other refineries follow same. Let the NNPC with this has actually told Nigerians that they are ready to do things right, because a lot of turnaround maintenance resources squandered over the years has left Nigerians losing a lot of confidence in the ability of government to manage its energy infrastructure. But with the news coming from Port Harcourt Refinery, I think we have reason to be hopeful once again for Nigeria and its economy. So kudos to Mr. President and kudos to the managers of Nigeria's oil sector. A lot more needs to be done.
Under President Tinubu, over $2.8 billion have been borrowed from the international, funding and organization, and that has continued to raise a whole lot of awareness and concern over the newly $2.2 billion loan that have been approved by the Nigerian Senate. That those that are really having a concern that it must be well managed, and that was the reason we had this conversation with Barrister Akanimo Basi, a legal practitioner and a political commentator. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you very much. It was nice to be with you here.
All right, and everyone, thank you so much for joining us on the show tonight. A lot of development in respect to bilateral relations with that of France, as the President Tinubu is still in talks. At the end of the day, we are aware that all what we want and many Nigerians are yearning for is for the country to work. And as always, may God bless Nigeria. Bye-bye for now.